Caulfield Cup Day preview. We've got a man on the ground down there, Shane F from the chat room, and you will also remember him from some of Milesy's previews 12 months ago, last spring in Melbourne. Welcome and thanks for coming on.
No, thanks a lot. It's great to be here.
And Gord, as usual, can't miss a show, can you, Gord? You're racking up the frequent flyer points.
Yeah, it's funny because Glenn whinges about it. For me, I'm doing the form so I can bet anyway. So what's the difference, you know? Sit on a show for an hour, chat, maybe pick up a couple of things off you two guys, and then we can bet away with confidence. It's good. It's good. And but it's all about betting, guys. At the end of the day, isn't it? Shane, seriously, like that's what it's about.
So, give us a little bit of a bio, Shane. I know that unfortunately you're a wage earner, which means that your racing attendance or perhaps ability to get amongst it daily is somewhat circumscribed.
Yeah, I'm more of a Saturday operator, but as I was mentioning to you before, I also like to have a look at the maidens and whatnot on a Sunday. And I do keep an eye out on during the week, but I definitely limit my bets during the week while I'm working.
You know the weird thing is, Shane, there's a lot of maidens on during the week. You're missing out on some opportunities there, right?
Yeah, hopefully I'll find the right ones though. So
yeah,
there's plenty to choose from, and I think one of the good pearls around is that there are always winners in front of you, and it's not what you may have missed for whatever reason along the way. You're, I presume, somewhere close to Caulfield. They had rain during the meeting yesterday, an inch of rain all up for the day, but about 6 mils during the program, which sent the rating from 5 to 10. How did it look to you? Or I presume you were watching.
Yeah, so I was on track yesterday. It was a lot of light rain early throughout the day, and then it got a little bit heavier throughout the day. It's just been more your continual type of rain, I guess, the last 24 hours. Nothing too heavy, but yeah, I still think we're going to end up with a heavy 10, or if you're an optimist, a heavy 9.5, I'd say.
Okay, all right, so you're not giving the track much hope. Of course, this year we revert to the old rail goes out for Caulfield Cup Day, which is, so 4 years ago and before, we used to go true into the 1,000 Guineas meeting and then out for Caulfield Cup Day, and then the last 2019, 20 and 21, we've gone true out to 9 or 10 and then back into true. So what's the track going to do?
I think we're just going to have to find out on the day, I think. Play it as it comes. Yeah, obviously with the wetter winter, they've changed that. I did notice that they changed that configuration this year. So I think you have to sort of start looking for, I think that the more inside area you'd have to start with, and then I think it'll just fan out wider as the day goes on.
And does that, I'm not being sort of privy to, I haven't paid attention to Caulfield over a long period of time, but it would seem that the rail out, 6 for example, as is on Saturday, it does cut up on the inside and they get wider? Is that what you're sort of saying?
I think that'd be a fair point, but there is anomalies where you do see horses can sort of duck back into the inside on occasion, but I'm expecting them to get quite wide later in the day.
Nigel mentioned the meeting when it was 6 metres out most recently, which is obviously a slightly different setup. It was rain during the day on the Rupert Clark day. That as soon as it got wet, a lot of the pace went out of the races. I guess that, if the inside does cut up a bit and they start fanning, then that is a situation where they perhaps drop anchor and just sit there and wait.
I think that's a fair assessment. I think that's what will happen.
All right. Well,
just face it, Mark. When you're down in Melbourne, they drop anchor all the time. They got no idea. They said B graders.
T Clark's down. T Clark's down there, so he's.
Isn't Josh Parr there? Is Josh Parr down there as well?
Yeah. Yep. All the. They're seeking the southern riches. Now, we'll just go through all the races, Shane, but don't feel like you need to weigh in on every race. It's perfectly happy for you to say, I'll have a nap there, as Gord often does. But race 1 is a funny little 3-year-old fillies race, and Quang Tree is $3.30 with Climbing Star. Hail Hath No Fury $4.40. Desire is $5.50, and the others are very rough. And the automatic maps here have an above-average pace with one of the favourites, Quang Tree, sharing the lead with Subliminal, and Climbing Star and Hail Hath No Fury just off the leading pair there. Are you a map man, Shane? Do you get amongst that sort of analysis or not?
Yeah, I think you'd be silly not to, and especially days like tomorrow, I think it will play a part. Probably the thing that I'm looking to mostly, I think at this stage, you probably want to be pretty close to the front half of the field, and then I think you then see a lot of horses ducking and diving, changing lanes, I guess, as we get through the day.
Okay. And did you have an opinion about this first race for the 3-year-old fillies?
Yeah, so I identified 3 horses that I thought were of interest to me. One was number 1, Quang Tree. It had a recent stylish jump out against a Group 3 winner, and then it had a fifth a Total Bloods job jump out. But it's looking like it's a bit of a miler plus, but it's the type of horse that's already looking like it can be a picket fence type winner.
Mm-hmm.
It showed that. And I think it's a good chance to kick off with a win here. The other ones of interest were number 5, Desire. I think it gets an inside barrier switch after a wide draw last start, which it bombed the start. And I think it's a potential improver, and it does have heavy form.
Mm-hmm.
And Climbing Star was the other one that I found, but I think it might be a bit too early for it tomorrow after its debut win. So I think I'll be looking in that first race. I'll be having bets on the 1 Quang Tree and 5 Desire, but possibly with Desire, I'll probably need $7 to $8 to.
Okay. Yeah, so I watched that Sandown program, and I watched that Waltz on By race, which is sort of a semi-feed for this race. We got 4 runners out of that race into this one, and they went across the line with a hanky over them. What are you thinking when you see that style of form reference?
What am I thinking?
Because it hasn't been too bad. I think we saw the first winner on yesterday, the filly that ducked up along the inside there and held them at bay. Name just escapes me, Josie something maybe. It came out of that race, and I was thinking, God, there was a length over about 9 horses. You know, how could you possibly find a horse from that race? But it seems to be just, maybe it's the nature of Sandown racing that they all wait for the long straight, and so perhaps there's a lack of pace in the races. So it's a sprint home, and there's not much between them at the finish.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think that particular race, I think they were sort of more the B graders heading towards the 1,000 Guineas path. So I think it's a fairly reasonable form reference, that race, I believe.
Okay, good. Anything float your boat here?
Oh, well, let's start off with an absolute moral. This thing cannot be beaten. It's a fantastic price, number 1 Quang Tree. I get everything I want. So I watch the videos of the horse, and I'm getting style, class. Then I check out data of trainer, data of stallion, and I get everything I want. Now, then I watch that trial, like the trial on the heavy that Shane just mentioned there. It didn't just win that trial on a wet track. It was super stylish. It was fantastic. Completely ignored the jump out. The jump out, it was just tagged out the back, did absolutely nothing. Paddy Payne? Yeah, Paddy Payne. Is that his name? Patrick Payne? Or is it Paddy? Is it Paddy or Patrick?
Paddy.
What does he like?
Yeah,
you like Paddy?
Yeah,
I think that jump out's kind of irrelevant because they knew what they had after that trial, because it trialled against some decent horses as well, and dead set owned them. I loved its runs last preparation as well. A couple of the wins were against really good quality horses. Even the second it came was against a horse called Bank Mer, where we've got form references with some of the other horses in the race. And it's just ticking every box to having this lot absolutely owned. I'll give you the figures on the Stallion. The Stallion, over the last 3 years on track ratings from 9 to 12, has had 72 runners for 17 winners at plus 7% POT. Don't we like that? And then let's bring up Paddy Payne, okay? Absolutely flying at the moment. And let's have a look at him in conditions that might be similar to this. So first up, over the last 180 days, he's had 57 runners for 11 winners at plus 9% POT. Okay. Then let's have a look at his track conditions. And his track conditions are 9 to 12. He's had 65 runners for 15 winners at plus 3.6 POT. So I'm getting style, I'm getting beautiful trial, I'm getting great runs last preparation, and I'm getting data that says, bang, this horse is a bet. Saying that, I'm going to make 2 plays in the race. I'm going to back it, and I'm going to lay number 3, which I love the fact that Shane didn't even mention it in his 3 chances. Like, at the moment, it's $4.20, and I give it none. It comes out of that waltz on by a race that Mark was talking about.
Wow. So you did get past number 1. I'm impressed with that, Gord. You actually found something to dislike in the others. All right.
Is that some evidence that maybe I do the form on not just number 1, is it, Mark?
All right, so that seems like there's a bit of consensus there with an alternative, alternative suggestions from both of you. Let's move on to race 2, 1700 metre benchmark 80. This looks like it belongs on the Wednesday program rather than, although this obviously this and Melbourne Cup Day is the same. You know, you get these programs where they're not necessarily top draw races. The support card is all about just supporting the main race, and in this race, Cap de Joie, which is still in the field at Randwick in race 10, is $2.30, St Bathans $5.50, Right You Are $8.50, and Sky Horse, which we last saw over 1.5 miles, but it's trained by Michelle Payne and ridden by Michelle Payne, who has had 9 rides in the last 6 months for 2 wins. It is $11 now. Our automatic maps supplied by Ratings to Win have basically 4 going forward and the rest going well back, but 4 going forward supplying an above average pace. They have Wild Vitality, I'm a Shelby, Grinzig Albi and Sky Horse up the front. So Sky Horse is the only one of those that's under $26, and the favourite is mapped well back. Is that how you saw it, Shane, that this favourite, presuming it runs in this race, actually settles well astern of them?
Yeah, that's its pattern. It sits back, it sits wide, and then it rips down the outside. I haven't seen it do much else besides that.
And I mean, those sort of horses I tend to be a little bit icky about. But how do you see this particular race and this favourite in this race?
Cap de Joie, I definitely had it in the black book. I think a lot of people may have after last start, and it's certainly it has shown a bit in the last year or so. It's only a compact little mare, but it does get going and finishes home strongly. And it is interesting that Damien Oliver's sort of stuck with it the last 3 races. I have a feeling it might go to Sydney. I don't have any intel on that, but that's just
it is right. It's a mare, and it's black type in Sydney, which all the mares love, or the owners of mares certainly love. So that's for a progressive-looking little mare like this, you would imagine that they'd perhaps have a dart. So obviously it's a bit problematic or hypothetical. Is there anything else you want to say about this race?
Yeah, so I am. Just to finish off on Cap de Joie, I am, now that the day's arrived and that it's possibly racing, I am a little bit worried about the price. I mentioned it was in my black book. Now that it's here, the $2 or above $2, it's a bit icky. The horses I'll mention, Right You Are is a talented galloper that was off the scene for 54 weeks. It also had a
year.
Yeah, it also had a trainer change from Price to Mar. I'm not sure what that was about, but it is a talented animal. Not too sure if a heavy track's really what you're looking for a horse coming back, but it is something to keep in the back of your mind. Probably the key chance is St Bathans. It's very similar to Cap de Joie in style. It sits back and rips home. It did do that last start. And I think the form from that race may be quite decent. And it is a swimmer too. So I think that makes it clear favourite if you have Cap de Joie out. The Michelle Payne one that you mentioned, Sky Horse, just if they're winning from the front, and it's definitely a swimmers only day. I think it might run a good race. It got shuffled back to last start, and it
True inside at Moonee Valley, I see. Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't really. It got shuffled back, and I guess when sort of the leaders and front runners get stuck in that position, they don't quite know what to do. But to its credit, it sort of didn't drop off. So I think it wouldn't surprise me tomorrow if it runs a good race. Oh, sorry, Saturday runs a good race.
All right. Yeah, I did notice that the St Bathans is by Maurice, and even Right You Are is by So You Think, which I've got down as one of my wet track sires. Gord, any interest here? It doesn't really look like a Gord race, although the favourite is lightly raced. And
I was interested. Look, I won't be betting in the race, but off listening to Shane there, one that sort of half piques my interest is number 3, Right You Are. I won't be betting in the race, but it's the kind of format I like, guys. Like like a really long spell, but you come back and you do a decent run, even though you're not completely primed, and you've got some good stuff and some good figures in your career. I won't be betting.
Race 3 is a 2,000 metre race for 3-year-old males, and we're seeing, I guess, this race is typically not that strong, but it does appear particularly empty this year. So Mr. Maestro, who won the pair of Flemington races, is $1.75, Muramasa $5.50, Red Sun Sensation at $6.50. And here we've got a below average pace with the favourite sitting right up on the speed with 2 others, Maxi Bon and Force Legend. Red Sun Sensation's got the blinkers on Saturday. It settles, well, it's mapped to settle rails midfield, Muramasa just ahead of it, but basically not much happening as far as tempo is concerned, not much happening as far as depth either, Shane.
No, you're exactly right there. I think this is probably a bit of a Gord race, this one. I don't think you have to go too far past number 1.
It is 2,000 metres, so I mean that the distance is actually above the race field. So I don't know, Gord, were you interested in this at all?
No, not at all. It's like it's a situation where you don't want to take the price number 1, but you also don't want to lay it either. It looks to have everything set up, but 2,000 metres, wet track, odds on. I think you've got to be a little bit cautious in that scenario, so no bet race for me.
What do you say about, I presume D-Lane, where is D-Lane? Is he up in Sydney, is he? Or is he suspended?
Yes, he is. Yeah, he's riding a couple of horses with great chances in Sydney, actually.
Yeah, okay, so that's where D-Lane is. What do you say about D-Lane to Harry Coffey, Shane?
Negative.
Well, don't you say that. I'm asking the Melbourne man.
Obviously it's a negative. I have seen Harry ride a few good winners lately. So, I mean, you're talking about, a country jockey. So perhaps he's a country jockey in reasonable form.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
I mean, it's exactly like Shane. It's like GP when like Keegan Latham comes to town. Now, like against the B graders, he looks great, but when you're up against J Mac and
I know, you look bog standard, don't you? I mean, even Jeff Penzer looks good in his right.
Yeah, off we go.
All right, so we'll move on to the fillies. There might be a bit more depth in the fillies, which is race 4. Foxy Cleopatra $4.60, Moco is $5, Pavitra and Renaissance Woman both out of the flight stakes at $6. Out to Wakamana and Kabaka at $10, and this looks a fast run race. Pavitra was keen outside the lead in the flight stakes in a generous tempo. Aunt Roberta and Uncorked for Gay is another on-pacer. Down to Let's Be Frank Baby along the rails there. So Foxy Cleopatra is, well, she needs to try and get in, presuming they'll race in formation. And Renaissance Woman is obviously off the speed with Moco. What about this one, Shane?
I think there's a few interesting runners in this one. There's definitely a lot more chances. 3 that I identified. One was number 3, Pavitra. As you mentioned before, it ran in the flight stakes. It looks like a really tough staying type to me. I noticed it's dropped back in distance, and now it's jumping back in distance. I don't know if you think that's a bit tricky dicky, but it definitely does look a staying type to me. And I think if they're able to sort of win from the front on Saturday, I like its chances. And it wasn't far off Fireburn, so that does read fairly well, I thought. The others I just mentioned, Foxy Cleopatra, I think that's the best of the Melbourne horses here. I like when they loop the field and then clear out at the Valley. I think that's a good sign. Both of those horses that I mentioned are by American Pharaoh, so I think they've got staying potential.
Mm-hmm.
And one at odds, I thought number 10 Macarena in its maiden last start was quite good. It covered enormous ground around the outside. If it gets a bit of a better ride, it might surprise this time, but I'm not too sure what's happened to Mark Kavanagh. He used to be a gun, and yeah, he's just a...
You're right, too angry, mate. Just if you're angry all the time, you've got to lose your mind, don't you?
He was pretty angry, yeah. All right, that's interesting about Macarena. That's one for video watchers, really, I guess. We are moving into territory 2,000 metres, 3-year-old fillies, where class is questionable. Gord, some of these well enough. Any interest?
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, I thoroughly do this race because I've got Sydney horses going down there, and I was able to put the Sydney horses in the bin because they won't handle the conditions. There's enough evidence on multiple variables to suggest that Pavitra and Renaissance Woman won't handle the conditions. Which, I mean, they were the two that I went looking for because I thought that was the right line. So when I put those two in the bin, and by the way, they're lightly raced, so I suppose there's enough evidence there for me to not be interested in backing them. Is there enough evidence there to me to be stamp them no chance? No. But it just meant that I could go looking elsewhere for a bet, and the obvious bet for me is number 7, Foxy Cleopatra. That was dynamic, that win last start. I noticed that, which you'll notice, Mark, too, sometimes when we have a track rating of a 5, it's actually a 3, but this 5 was actually a 5.3.
Yep.
Look, I'm saying we're going to be a lot worse tomorrow, but I'm saying that it's maybe a little bit more evidence than otherwise might be the normal circumstances with that official track rating. Only bet for me, number 7, Foxy Cleopatra in an open race.
The Guineas result yesterday was quite interesting because we had 2 horses down from the Flight Stakes, North Star Lass,
and Madam Pomeroy. By the way, well in, Tony from the Moon just stamped it. He was all over it. He was talking to me before the show. God, I'm so keen on this horse. And I think when he came on the show, he was a little bit more circumspect, but he was very keen. And good work, mate.
She did have, she came back coughing from and she lost a plate in the Flight Stakes. But of course, North Star Lass was up the front, and Madam Pomeroy was back just in front of Fireburn. And if you remember, the race was basically dominated by the on-paces. So you had North Star Lass leading Pavitra, and you had She's Extreme, 1 out, 1 back, and Zougotcha box seating. And so the 3 of the first 4 filled the placings in the race. North Star Lass and Madam Pomeroy started the same price in that race, and yesterday they started a long way apart. J-Mac got on board as well.
Yeah, I know. J-Mac gets onto it as well. It was so funny because the first horse he speaks to me about is North Star Lass, and I'm saying, oh, Jesus Christ, I think Tony's lost his mind here because North Star Lass has no chance.
Yeah, okay.
Right. And there was, isn't it amazing that Madam Pomeroy is Madam Pomeroy, isn't it?
Yeah.
It was longer than North Star Lass. It just made no sense at all.
Well, they're just looking at the result. I look at this race and I go, "Oh, Pavitra sits outside the lead in a Sydney Group 1. It goes K-Mac to Jamie Carr. It's gone up to 1860, come back to 1500.
Negative jockey change.
All right, okay. Whatever you say. The other one's got Rachel King to Josh Parr as well, the other horse out of the Flight Stakes. I know that Midway Mark in the chat room, otherwise known as Crookie, is very keen on this Renaissance Woman getting up to a trip. So, you've got a bit of work to get past them, I think, Gord, those 2 horses. It's a bit of a race.
Mark, my decision was purely made on the wet. That's why I've gotten rid of them. I'm not seeing any evidence in breeding or performance to suggest that they can handle. And Shane, you're going 9.5 to 10, which means it could be an 11. Shane, no comment.
He's already said. He's already
Yeah.
said that he's, he said for the optimists it'll be 9.5.
Yeah, yeah.
Is it mainly because they raced on it when it was raining yesterday, which does really damage tracks?
Yeah, that's right. Both that and yeah, it's just been fairly constant. But hopefully we just get a little bit of time to dry it out just before it starts. But I think yeah, 9.5 to 10.
Yeah, because it's still raining there at the moment. I note that there's forecast rain at lunchtime tomorrow, which I disagree with based on my reading of the map. But as you say, it's already happened. All right, race 5 is 1400 metre race for 3-year-old colts and geldings, and 99 runners come out of the lead up at Moonee Valley on the Friday night. The market starts with Angry Skies at $4.60, Eponymous $4.60, Garza Bianca or Garza Blanca at $7, Lincoln Square and Sandpaper at $10, and we have a what looks to be a fast-paced race. Custodian's got the blinkers back on and it's drawn wide going forward. Yaki Ishi gets well up on the speed with Hell Rip. Lincoln Square not far away. And in behind them, Zamborghini, Gazablanca and Liberty Steps. So, well, it's pretty hard. Well, I mean, there is form away from the Moonee Valley race, but I presume that it's going to dominate proceedings here, Shane.
Yeah, I've looked quite far and wide in this race. The 4 that I identified here were 15 Gazablanca. It had some battling trials and a bit of a battling debut, but then it actually went back and had a jump out on the heavy. Ever since then, I've been really impressed with it. And then it went to a maiden in the country and won by a mile. So I was really taken by it. Eponymous, number 8. Obviously, it was hard to miss it running home at Moonee Valley that night. It was in the fast lane, so I'm not too sure if that made it look a little bit better than what it was. And I'm still not too sure about the ones that Waller sends down here, down to Melbourne for these types of races. Number 12, Angry Skies, I think's got talent, but it's a little bit green. I think it'll be a better horse next prep. And the other one I thought could run a race was Sketched, number 9. It was a strong maiden winner 2 starts back before copping what I thought was some Moonee Valley bias the other night, and it was stuck wide, but it still ran reasonably well. But if it can get a position on Saturday, I think it'll be in the finish. But I'm actually quite keen on number 15, Gazablanca here. Okay,
off the Murtoa Maiden, that's, it is a race perhaps where you go looking for different form because Eponymous seemed to stand out from the Moonee Valley runners, Gord, but of course he's by I am Invincible.
Yes, I mean, that is true, but I don't 100% stamp Stallion stuff. I mean, that was an official rating of a 6 and came out on our stuff as a 6 as well, and that was its best run of its career. So, there's the odd Redoubt's Choice that runs all right in the wet too, Mark.
No, well, just please don't tell
GP
don't.
that. Yes, it's on top for me, Eponymous. I actually liked its return at Warwick Farm, and I liked what it did late there at the Valley. It should have won that race. That's the major lead-up. Is it priced like it won it? Yes. You know how...
But it was one of those situations where you watch the race and you go, oh, what's this horse totally uncomfortable back in the field? Everything else is getting up and running.
Yeah.
Now, Shane's mentioned that the inside was running well, but it was just a horrible, horrible position to be in.
Yeah, clearly on top for me, number 8. I will be backing it. And the other horse I'm going to back in the race is number 5, Yaki Ishi. I think it's about 30 to 1 at the moment. It's out of Maurice. They're swimmers. It only got the job done by a small margin, I know, at Geelong, but we've already talking about this before, that provincial form in Victoria actually stacks up a lot better in the metropolitan racing than it does in New South Wales. And I kind of liked its first up run at Sandown, and I also like the fact that it's got one of the peak figures in the race, which is what it did at Flemington, where it came 3rd in the size produce group 2. This is 30 to 1, guys. It shouldn't be. It's an easy bet, number 5. So 8 from 5.
I'll ask Shane about that because obviously, I mean, the size every year is a bit meh. But I mean, a horse that does that at its second start, that leads them up in the size and runs third, gets beaten a length. I'm not anticipating it sort of being outside the market, third up in its second preparation. What's it? Where's it gone wrong, or why doesn't it have obvious claims?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was just a bit of a blind spot for me. Yeah, I think maybe Gord would be better to answer that.
Well, he's
he
thinks the market's a complete idiot. So
yeah.
I know what I'll be getting if I ask him. Put it that way.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's.
By the way, you don't need to find many positives about a 30-1 shot.
No.
You just
need to find something positive about
throw
it.
a couple of hundred on, and if it lobs, great. Like, who cares?
But we have got the man on the ground that's found the Matoa maiden winner, which I think is, it's got leading connections, so it's a pretty interesting runner.
Now that Shane said that, I'm going to at least cover my bets on Eponymous and Yaki Ishi on that, because we've already talked to Shane about what his expertise is, and he's found this off his expertise, and that's really important information.
And
go on, Shane.
Just a side note, so there was a horse called Thought of That 3 years ago. It wasn't this particular race, but it came out of a maiden as well and won on Caulfield Cup Day. I just had that in my mind. I think it might have been Ma as well, but it's doable.
Yeah, look, they're fertile races, and I think you mentioned to us at the beginning of the show and earlier off air that you're looking for up and comers, and I mean this is the area of racing that if you specialise in, you say, look, I'm going to try and identify horses that've got scope, that are lightly raced improvers. Then then you can be ahead of the market.
Oh, Yaki Ishi comes off a maiden victory too.
Yes. All right. So that's good. Sounds like good analysis. The sixth.
Who's it? Sorry, Shane. Sorry, Mark. Who's M. de Kock?
He's a South African guy, isn't he?
So he's gone in partnership with Griffiths for some reason, or?
That's right.
Okay. Yeah. Thought he might have been ex-cricketer.
Most of the de Kocks are South African, Gord.
Yeah. Are you talking about most cocks come from South Africa, or?
Well, no. The interesting thing is the ones from South Africa are cocks, whereas the ones from England are coes.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Cobain, I'm referring to mainly, and Coburn. But anyway, race 6, 1,100 metres, listed race for fillies and mares. Are there any fillies in here? I don't think so. Juan Diva, who's now a 6-year-old mare, $5.50. Narge Maddie with the Caulfield creds at $5.50, resuming. My Lever at $7.50. A very fine red, $8. Rose Quartz and Shallstar off the highway run, $10. And they get along here, so there's plenty to go forward. Rose Quartz, Shallstar is keen. Juan Diva's keen. Never Standing Still out from a wide gate. Melba Storm, Maliva and Calcani Royale also have speed. A very fine red seems to be buried down there on the inside, and Narge Maddie gets well off the speed here. Gord, I'll give you first crack at this one because there's a few of your girls in this race.
Yeah, I've kicked a lot out of the bed in this race. Kind of disappointed with the track conditions here, guys, because I would have declared Juan Diva on a good track. Now,
the trial seemed to be quite outstanding.
The trial was absolutely outstanding. That's proven fresh. The interesting thing is when you interrogate the runs on the soft and the heavy. So, guys, we've got 5 runs on soft for 1 second, and we've got 2 runs on heavy for 1/3. There was a lot more credit to those runs than people realise. So they might have stamped this horse as just a dry tracker, but I think there's a chance maybe it's not.
It is by Snitzel.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's out of Snitzel, which is my favourite wet track sire. It's got some beautiful runs first up. It's got magnificent trials. Could we be getting to the middle outside of the track? Well, I'm going to listen to Shane in that circumstance and say by the time we get to this race, maybe it's the go, and he can really do some beautiful late sectionals. Jay Collette, best wet jockey in Australia. He won't be pushing it round the home turn and getting it unbalanced. He'll be just have it balanced and try and ping that last 300 metres. Saying all that, I would love to see some more evidence of it being able to handle a bog track, because this is an open race. But it's the one that caught my eye.
And anything else to say, or we'll move on to our other analyst?
Oh, I could talk about 1,000 horses in this month, right? But
no, that's the one that caught your eye. I understand, and you've sort of laid out the case. So where did you start, Shane?
Just to touch on Juan Diva. So I think it's obviously seemed to have improved since it went to Freedman. And it's one thing I do like about it is it travels well, and it's won in multiple states. It's won in Queensland, Victoria already, and in Sydney. But yeah, I do have a question on whether it can run on that surface. Najmati obviously has an electric turn of foot. You don't really get to see it in the trials, so I sort of tend to throw them out. The question is whether it'll have its turn of foot blunted on the track. So that sort of left me with 11, A Very Fine Red, which if you're just reading the newspaper and doing the form off the newspaper, your eyes would pop out of your head, I think, just seeing that it's been racing against Marzu, Zapateo, and not being disgraced. It's trialled well against Joyful Fortune, who come down here and looked.
Oh, yeah. Yep. The stablemate, Joyful Fortune, who's in the Everest.
It trialled well against Eduardo in the same one. So I think maybe it might be its day, A Very Fine Red. It's got an interesting, I think it's drawn the inside now with scratches.
Yep.
So it might have a few options there. So yeah, I thought I'd probably just take a chance on A Very Fine Red. The only other horse I'll mention is Rose Quartz, number 6, but I think it might be scratched. But keep it in mind for the Flemington Carnival because it's a good horse.
Okay, Graham Begg, that's definitely his MO, so I concede that's a likelihood. A Very Fine Red was in what I describe as the slow lane first up, and if you take away her 1,200 metre runs, I think her form looks a bit better than it does otherwise. So I'm interested in what you say about her, A Very Fine Red.
I saw the line through Coco Rocks, who I lost the small GDP of an African nation yesterday on. So
there was talk about broken remotes everywhere. But,
yeah. 2 broken remotes yesterday. You're right, actually, Mark. By the way, I just will add there. So I brought up Mark Newnham. Now you obviously see the blinkers again on A Very Fine Red. Newnham blinkers again is gigantic, guys. Over the last 3 years, 30 runners for 11 winners at plus 60% POT. Blinkers again for Newnham. Like, that's even bigger than Pride. So
Joey tends to be more formulaic. I'd suggest that it's maybe a bit more science or art when it comes to Newnham, perhaps.
Very interesting run.
Yeah, look, he produced 2 winners yesterday out of the market, both out of the market, and certainly the first one just streaked to the line. The Group 2 over the 1,000 is race 7, and I don't think we have the Challenge Stakes, which is Group 2, I guess. But other than that, I don't think we have another Group 1,000 metre race, whereas Melbourne has the Lightning, it has the Moir, and this is third one in the pecking order, Group 2 over 1,000. Dragonstone, $3.80. Generation, $4.80. Asfura, $5.50. Kalos at $9. Express Pass and Ashford Street at $12. And fast looking speed, we've got Malkovich there down on the inside to drive them along. Sartorial Splendour has good speed. Free of Debt Generation and Barossa with a possessed of speed as well. And then even the bracket below them won't be far away. So Dragonstone obviously out the back here with Express Pass. How'd you line these up, Shane?
So I identified just the 2 horses that I was interested in, and I think due to the pace and just the types of horses in this race, I thought this might be, if it hasn't started already, I think this will be the race where we'll start to see some horses fanning really wide and storming home. And the 2 that I like are 9 Dragonstone and 6 Express Pass. Dragonstone's always been an eye catcher up in Sydney. I probably would have thought it might have won even more races than it has, based on its ability. I think it might be one of Gordon's actually. I think he's.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's definitely a boyfriend of mine. You know, I've just went dynamic, beautiful late sectionals, handles all conditions. Yeah.
I'll watch its trial. It seems to be going well. It's definitely got a turn of foot, and it seems to be okay on the heavy as well. So I'm not really worried there. And Express Pass, the other one. It's the other one that's just going to be flopping out the back from the inside draw, or gate 5, I think it has. I think those two are going to make runs together, and they're the ones that I'm keen on.
Yeah, normally I would want them drawn a bit wider, but it appears that most of the others are go-forward horses, so it's quite easy to navigate from where they'll be. Gord, you've been a Dragonstone man for a long time. Where do you sit with this one?
I have it on top. I was expecting to get a better price, but was it 5-2 at the moment or something like that? I mean, normally, this time of the year, they make considerable mistakes in Melbourne by pricing their local horses far
but there's not much local form, is there? I mean, there's bits and bobs of nothing, really.
By the way, I talked about Newman in the last race with the blinkers and how happy I was with that. Well, I get blinkers first time on Dragonstone here. Shane, wouldn't you have loved to draw middle to wide, but like the 2 scares me a bit. But you reckon there'll be separation of field or something, or?
Yeah, I do. I think the others will go that quick that they'll just be able to lag behind and then come with their runs.
Yeah. Okay, beauty. Well, 9 on top for me, and the other horse, which actually you can line up with this horse, and I was expecting it to be shorter than it is. This is just it's a really easy bet. He's number 7, Kalos. I know it's never run on the heavy, but it's out of Medagliadoro, which is Glenn's favourite sire on the wet, and it's never run on heavy, and it's got really good data on soft. So it's got lines through some proper horses. I mean, we're talking it's tried, well, it's obviously been all over the goddamn world, but it's been down to Melbourne, and I know it's a Flemington straight races, and you've got to take that into consideration, but it beat a horse called General Bow by 2 lengths, absolutely owned it. Got the win in sort of a weakish race last start, but not all favours as far as the map is concerned. It carried 61 kgs on that occasion. It's down to 54 on conditions that I think might suit it, and it's $12 to find out. Backing 2 horses. I'm 9 from 7, but as you can tell, guys, the better result for me will be number 7.
Just wanted to ask Shane about a couple of horses here that slightly mysterious. I mean, Oxley Road seems to have gone bad. Is there any intel about Oxley Road?
I can't explain the reason, but it's obviously just lost its shine, that horse.
And Asfura started like a very, very short price, obviously a lightly raced winning mare in a 9.55, seemed to have lost its way there. Can she bounce back, or is perhaps the conditions of the race don't suit her against some of the horses she raced against at Moonee Valley? But I mean, that appears like she was put out of play there.
Asfura is actually one of mine. That's one of the ones that I've found in the maidens and have followed all the way through. So I actually rate it quite highly. I do think this is probably its level though, and obviously it was quite unlucky last start, but I think it'll run a nice 3rd or 4th.
All right, you're with the blouses here, which seems fair enough. Race 8 is we're back with the mares here, 1400 metres, Group 2, and we've got Palacepan out of the one of the Sydney mares races, 550, with Chain of Lightning, who was unbeaten until last start, had gone around $4, $4, $4, $8, $4, and then suddenly started $1.70, $1.90, and got beaten against Zapateo. That's 550, Chain of Lightning. Kiss on All Four Cheeks, which is one that Gord got home 2 starts back at $8. Pride of Jenny, who didn't get even near the lead last start, $8. Flying Mascot and Argentia at $10. Again, a number to go forward here. Flying Mascot from the deep. Pride of Jenny would like the lead, but she looks to only come across with Flying Mascot, if that. Tycoon Evie goes forward. Mirror Vision's got good gate speed. Barb Raider is resuming, but races on the speed. And Palizapan from inside draw looks to hold her position. Where did you start here, Shane?
I'm not really keen on this race, to be honest. The horses that I do like here are probably not suited. Number 2, Barb Raider, I think it needs further, and it'll be one for another day, I think. But I do rate it quite highly, and I anticipate I will be backing it later in the spring. And the other one was number 15, Fortunate Kiss. I think it's running fairly well. I'm not too sure if it's a wet horse, but it does fit that blouser profile that we were just talking about before, that we may see it run on a day like this, but I'm not really keen on the race. Normally when I'm not too keen, I can't really find too many. Normally something from outside the box normally wins, something like maybe Palizapan from Queensland or something like that might run well, but I wasn't too keen here.
Fair enough, Gord. What are you looking at here?
Well, I mean, thank God that I have no respect for the market, because I've backed a horse in this race clear favourite, and it's over 20 to 1. And I just got a little bit of a warm feeling there after listening to Shane. Number 2, Barb Raider. Bloody hell, why not have a crack at over 20 to 1, Shane? Seriously.
Seems pretty well performed, and
shit, man. Like, it won first up. Last preparation it won over 1,400 metres at Flemington. I mean, you've seen that flop on the heavy, but that was the Nimmerley Group 1 Queen of the Turf. Like, that's sort of half forgivable.
Well, that was also on Queen Elizabeth Stakes Day, and you have a look at some of the horses that did flop on that day, like the horses, Very Elegant and Montefilia Animo. They just disappeared on that day, so who knows what that day was.
Yeah, man, and I'm looking at some other first up stuff that is actually quite nice. I've spent some time in the lovely warm sun up in Brisbane. I'm a proven winner with 13 starts for 5 winners, 4 placings, 4 seconds, 2/3. I'm against that limited opposition. It's a bet for me. Saying that, I mean, other horses I had a look at was obviously Mirror Vision, which I've got a bit of a feel for, and Chain of Lightning, who's been dominate, but he's getting rather late preparation now. And even horses like Rocket Clock can do stuff first up as well, but I'm assuming they'll scratch on the wet track. Look, it's a super open race, but there's just a really easy play on number 2, Barb Raider. Back it each way, because it's out of barrier 9. As Shane said, by this stage of the day, we could be coming down the middle. It is proven over longer distances. It's one of those horses that first up could just come home really nicely in the right part of the track and lob into a hole, or maybe even win at gigantic odds. It's the bet for me, number 2.
Before we leave this race, Shane, what's your thought on Chain of Lightning getting out to 1,400, which seems, it's obviously it's on trial at the Journey on Saturday?
Yeah, I think you say it yourself. You said it yourself. After its failure, if you call it that, last start, I think maybe they're just testing out the 1,400 before sending it for a spell. Who knows?
Yeah.
Okay, right. Sending it on a bit of reconnaissance. Fair enough. Gord, you ruled out Palizapan. It was hard to fault her 2 Sydney runs, and in fact, it's hard to fault her form if you take out the mile. The time she's tried the mile.
I haven't ruled her out, Mark. It's a really open race. But there's just for me, like, if there's flashing lights about a horse over 20 to 1, then,
Oh, look, I agree with you. I saw Barb Raider and started circling all sorts of things. So
yeah, I know. The old ticks and crosses.
She does it for me too. Yeah. The main event is the Caulfield Cup. Race 9 on the card. Smoke and Romans is a dominant favourite at $4.80, and it's $10 bar, $10 Benno. Who has his brother in the race for the first time. $10 Benno, $12 Nonconformist, $13 Knight's Order with Numerian and Allegron, $15 Gold Trip, $15 Douay, and $16 Inspirational Girl, 20s and longer the rest. And before I get into the map, I just wanted to talk about this baggy green mare that used to be trained by Guy Walter, Gord, and when Guy died, she had one start for Todra Willer. Anyway, she won. He had 11 starts. She won 1 race, a Goulburn maiden over a mile.
Yeah. What's the name of the horse, Mark? Sorry.
Baggy Green.
Oh.
And her mother was Star Spangled. Her mother had Fun Star and Young Star. Young Star, of course, ran Winks to a length in the Turnbull Stakes. Anyway, Baggy Green has produced Tafane, No Compromise, which won his Group 1 last start.
Yeah.
Bradman, which has only won 2 races in New Zealand, but won last week in New Zealand, first up. And Benno. So No Compromise and Benno are brothers going around in this race.
What a mare! What a mare! Jesus.
Anyway, she's going all right. The map in this race is...
Jesus Christ, you'd have to put her up there with my mum.
No, she's better than your mum. She's had more than 2 kids.
Yeah.
The speed in this race, like the lead up, well, one of the lead ups is the Turnbull Stakes, which was very slowly run. This race, Knight's Order leads again, but I imagine that from the deep, Knight's Order, who's quite dour, will attempt to use the conditions to his advantage. So I presume he rolls along here. 3 others to occupy very handy positions. Charlie Rose, which is a roughie. Smoke and Roman's the favourite. Posse's up. And Numerian gets forward. So they're actually, out of the sort of 18 to go round, there aren't that many go forward horses, but there are 18 going around. And as I say, I think Knight's Order will roll along. Have you got a thought on the map in this race, Shane?
Yeah, I thought it'd probably be one of the sort of slower tempos that we've seen, and especially with the track condition, maybe they will be not going quite as lickety-split as they have in previous editions.
So Smoke and Romans he was the emerging stayer this time last year, culminated with the Pakenham Cup win, and this time in he's beaten Gold Trail at Moonee Valley Moonee Valley, Caulfield. And then managed to win the Turnbull Stakes, as I say, off a very slow speed. He obviously drops about 55 kilos into this race. How do you see him, and how do you see this race?
Yeah, well, the 2 horses that I had in my mind at the start, or a couple of weeks ago, was Jouet and Smoke and Romans. I thought Jouet would probably go in the favourite, and I thought Smoke and Romans would be probably a good little rough result going into this race. But here we are going in. I think that the Turnbull win by Smoke and Romans has just blown the price out of the water now. I think it's just the obvious Smoke and Romans. The Mar Eustace, they just tend to turn their horses into winners and build them up, and then here it comes here with a lightweight, being a regular winner. It's had such a good base, and it's just got the perfect setup on Saturday. It's just going to be in the right spot. It's going to get the right pace. It's hard to see it not in the finish. Jouet, who I mentioned before, I am sticking with it. It does have a little bit of wet form back in the day against the likes of Very Elegant over a mile. I just think I still think it may be the best horse in the race. And although last start was a little bit disappointing, it raced a lot more forward than it usually does.
It seemed very soft in the market last start, and as if, I don't know, there was something, I won't say untoward, but it didn't appear to be right, the way the betting went and where it settled in the run.
It definitely surprised me. I'm not sure if it was a tempo thing, but it was just an interesting run in terms of just, you rarely see it sort of slogging it out, and I don't think many horses got past it, so it was actually a pretty decent run, but normally it's the one going past horses at the end of a race.
Yeah, okay, so it's interesting you say that about Douay and Smoke and Romans. You would have expected them to be the other way round, obviously barring what happened last start. Gord, this is the feature. What are you saying here?
Oh, Jesus Christ. Isn't the weight weird with this race? One of the horses I'm going to back is Gold Trip, guys. And what is it? Smoke and Romans is down 4 kilos off.
Yeah, and it's up 3.
And Gold Trip's up 3. So there's
that's
7
why
kilo turnaround.
That was what all the betting was about last start, of course.
But I mean, my suggestion is that even with Smoke and Romans being $5-6 on that weight turnaround and its victory over Gold Trip should be over 20-1, which it isn't at the moment. Because I'd suggest maybe there's some anchor of early money sort of holding that back. So I'm expecting a blow on number 1 Gold Trip, and I'll have something on. It's not my top selection. I think this horse is just going to win. Number 10 Benno. I get that lovely quick back up. Man, that was a glorified barrier trial last start, guys. Like they weren't trying at all. That was purely just a run to get it ready for the Caulfield Cup. It was against the absolute A graders in Anima, and I'm thunderstruck. I know that I'm poo-pooing that as far as A graders form is concerned, but this Caulfield Cup is not A grade. It carried 58 kilos on that time. It's down to 53. It's back on the wet track. If you notice, it's run on the wet track this preparation. Mark was on that incredibly biased track where it did a magnificent job. It was actually the run of the day in the wrong part of the track. That's ticking another little beautiful box for me. As far as it's only ever run over 2,400 metres, it was as a 3-year-old in the Derby where it came second by a tiny margin to Hitotsu. I'm very keen on number 10 Benno, and I might have something small on Gold Trip, and my third selection is Smoking Romans. I really do think that the Sydney or the last start Sydney form isn't going to stack up on this occasion.
Yeah, well, look, Benno is the horse that jumps up at me. Of course, he went around with Nonconformist last week. Nonconformist ran second to Incentivise last year. I mean, Nonconformist is a reasonable yardstick against a lot of these. Of course, Benno seems to be bloody glued to Allegron. They've run twice.
That is an anchor mark. I know.
They have run twice together.
If I didn't see that Allegron, I'd be really happy.
Yeah, but I mean, Smoking Romans gets map favours. I mean, Shane's described it fairly correctly. Whereas, Benno is, I presume, he's going to be ridden quite conservatively from out there, 18. So,
well, Jamie Carr's the only jockey that my ratings to win spits out the highest figure possible of a 3.25, and she's the only one where I take a 50% negative. What's
the story? You better explain that particular opinion, Gord, because I mean, obviously, she's a poster girl and Glenn says, "Oh, Jamie Carr just rides all these winners," which she does.
She does. She gets the absolute pick of the rides, which is great, and she lets the horses win. And you can ride like that when you're up against the B grade Mexican jockeys, but you can't ride like that when the A grade Sydney jockeys go down there. They will make proactive steps to win races, which is why they're better. And they've got more core strength. They've got better balance.
So you're describing her as Rachel King given the pick of the rides.
I'd suggest if Rachel King was in Melbourne, she would be battling for best jockey with Jamie Carr. That's how much of a difference I think the Sydney jockeys have, or how much of a margin the Sydney jockeys have on the Melbourne jockeys.
Yeah, you look at a jockey like Damien Lane, and I'm going, well, he can match it with Sydney riders. So what's so weak about the strength of Melbourne riders?
Well, there's another thing there too, and that is the pace scenarios are disgraceful.
Shane, how do you feel about a horse ridden by Jamie Carr that you like, or are you anxious if there's a danger to your horse that Jamie Carr's on? Is there any sort of narrative you've got there?
Maybe not a year ago. I think ever since that scandal, I don't think she's ridden as well, personally. But I assume you know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Yeah.
Look, we all read New Idea. Don't worry.
But yeah, I think she's starting to find a little bit more form. She's certainly still getting good rides, so there's no excuses for her. I just wanted to ask, by the way, no compromise. Is that any chance?
Yep, chance.
Well, see, if you look at the lines through, he came up through the lead-up races with Knight's Order and Benno and Allegron, and he was battling. He wasn't being horribly affected by the bias in some of those runs. Obviously, he does a lot better once he gets out to 2,400, which he got last start, and he was bolting on the turn. T. Berry cost the horse 2 or 3 lengths, I think. So, but you're never really looking at the Metropolitan and saying that's I want that for my Caulfield Cup form.
Yeah,
so
I think was Railings the last winner a long time ago, but
yeah, that is a long time ago. That's D. Beedman.
I do notice.
Nope. Pause.
We've got a frozen Foley here.
Oh, well, we'll just do fill up. By the way, I'm not having you got Jamie Carr. She's a great jockey. I'm just saying she's overplayed by the mark.
Sorry, Shane.
You paused on her, so you got to go back like 20 seconds or something.
Yeah, sorry. I was just mentioning no compromise. It's had so many runs at 2,400 in the wet. I'm just wondering, does practice make perfect at all, or?
Look, he'll run very well because he's in a happy place in his preparation. I would think that he'd sort of run fifth, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
The last, I must say, I didn't have much of a taste for this race. We have Old Flame, which Jamie Carr perhaps destroyed last week. Someone wrote it on a YouTube channel, worst ride ever. $4.80, Lady of Honour $5, $6.50 Bandersnatch, $7.50 Catalyst, and $10 Cinnawon. Our automatic maps have a fast pace with open-minded. Lady of Honour, who certainly gets well forward, would like the van. And Streets of Avalon, who is a keen bean, freshened up off Wait for Age race, getting well forward. They're three that strike out here from Lightsaber, Bandersnatch, Old Flame, Poland. They're sort of midfielders, so certainly three to get well forward here from the rest of the pack. So can you take us home, Shane? It just seemed quite opaque, this race, to me.
Yeah, I thought the only one you could really have a little bit of confidence in, I thought, was possibly Bandersnatch, number 5. It was just an eye catcher first up. It sort of has that carnival horse, the Blouser, that'll sort of have its win during the carnival. And it has some wet form in the past, which I think shows it's capable.
B. Abdallah and he just swam around Randwick one day. That was 15 months ago at Randwick on that occasion. So is that where you start and finish?
I will just mention another one. It's a little bit similar to Right You Are earlier in the day. Ironclad, which is a South Australian horse.
I think it's come out, hasn't it?
Has it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's out.
Yeah, I thought it might have been coming out. But if for anyone watching, that's one to watch out for in the future as well. I think it's a pretty handy horse as well.
Similar type of race, is that what you're thinking?
I think around about this level's probably as far as you want to go, but it's one to watch.
All right, Gord, anything excite you here? Old Flame was, as I say,
disappointing for me last week. Yes,
but she got completely lost, didn't she? I mean,
but she's a passive rider. She just sits there, and if she gets a gap, she gets a gap. But I'm not knocking her. Horses came back into her and she was forced to go back to last. And I think if the horse was going to win, then it would have done more late than it actually did. And it's priced it was a terrible ride. Maybe it could have been in the finish, but it's priced like it won that race. Man, there's just such a super easy bet in this race. I think it's probably a moral. It's number 5 Bandersnatch. Seriously, I love how Shane goes, here. I think this might be a bet, and then I go, I'm so excited to back this horse. Man, I love that return to racing. The pattern first up to second up improvement. It did a 99.8 first up on the 2.4. It's proven on the bog tracks. Best ever victory, as Mark said, was a 4 lengths win at Randwick over 1,400 metres. On officially a 9 on an hour stuff at 10.1. So we've got track conditions. We've got beautiful performance first up. We've got improvement second up. We've got limited beast running against us. This is just such an easy bet. We've got a lovely barrier 14, Shane, for last race of the day if that pattern ends up being established. And we're getting $7 or $8 to find out. I'm as you might tell, I'm reasonably keen on number 5 Bandersnatch.
All right. Well, that seems a good way to say sayonara to the program. Shane, is there any horses on the program that you want to identify as, the horses you're particularly keen on?
I think the Cup, normally I wouldn't say it's a strong point, but the Cup's a pretty good betting race for the ones I mentioned, Jouet and
Spoken Romans. Yep.
I still am quite keen on Garza Blanca. I'm a believer in it, so I'll be having a good result on that, I think.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for coming on. And
Shane, one more question. Who's going to win the Everest, the biggest race in Australia?
Yeah, we don't care down here.
I have to say, the Caulfield Cup's a bit more interesting than the Everest, especially the way the Everest has gone. You know, with Nature Strip just dominating. I know that there's now interest because there'll be people talking about the map, but you know, it's a bit. You know, I told you about that lead up to the Everest last week, Gord, the 1100 metre race at Caulfield, ingratiating, you know, coming out of that race. Yeah. We've got Melbourne form everywhere. Joyful Fortune, it won a straight race at Flemington in a midweek program on Sunday.
Oh, and that's why we get ready to keep on multi-pressing our little pink button on Betfair, Mark. That's what we do. When Sydney goes to Melbourne, we click the blue, and when Melbourne comes to Sydney, we click the pink.
All right. Well, Gord, did you have horses that you wanted to trumpet on Saturday?
I think it's like my biggest betting race of the day is going to be race 1. I am really keen on Kwang 3. Good to see that Shane has affirmed that. And then quite interesting, we lined up later on as well on horses where he had on top, but with maybe less enthusiasm than me, but I like it when the expert in the area actually does line up with you. What were they, guys? Oh, geez, I can't even remember. Anyway, obvious from what I've said. What I've seen.
All right, well, thanks very much for watching our Caulfield preview. And
by the way, have you seen this T-shirt I've got on there? Can you read that, guys?
Something about bored to death. For a moment there, you nearly bored me to death. Well, that's okay.
That's not for you, Shane. My wife bought me this because she needs to go to sleep during conversations sometimes.
You've always got yourself to keep you entertained, Gord. You're fine. Yeah. All right. Thanks for watching this preview, and obviously, if you've never tried us, you're mad not to, because you get 2 weeks for free to check it all out. And there's the world famous chat room in which you do get a large contribution from Shane. Shane, you're pretty up and about in the chat room, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm an oversharer, a bet spammer, whatever you want to call
it.
But it is
definitely not. I always check out your stuff in there, so I love it.
Oh, it's an awesome community. I'm so enamoured of it. So yeah, you get entry into the chat room. You get exposure to all the information that we have. And as I say, you don't pay anything for 2 weeks, just so you can get a feel for it. So if you've never tried it, please come on board. Meanwhile, breaking news, the Everest preview tomorrow will feature Karuki, otherwise known as Midway Mark, and Libby Hopwood. So we'll have a foursome on the Everest preview show tomorrow. And as I say, thanks very much again to Shane for coming on today. So I will say bye.
Cheers, Shane.